Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why Everyone Plays. Before we get started, let's just have a moment of silence in memory of Cho'Gath. What a tragedy for his ultimate, the shining virtue of his kit, to be commandeered and given to a basic ability on a 6-second cooldown. No, but seriously, today's installment is going to be on a character who everyone knew was going to be a mainstay ever since we saw her kit. At least to me, her advent foreshadowed Riot's eventual descent into overloaded champion design because if any of you remember how busted she was on release, you would think she's a product of 2020 or after. Anyways, let's investigate why everyone plays Camille, the Steel Shadow. As one of the so-called 4 horsemen, or horsewomen of top lane, Camille's influences remain consistent ever since her release. Despite the role's extremely diverse champion pool and meta volatility, she almost always commands a mid to high pick rate and an equally high win rate, more noticeably in higher elos like Diamond and above. Up in top lane, she has a deceptively safe and strong early game relative to her scaling, while everywhere else, she's notorious for gap closing on you from a full screen away and pinning you down before killing you in 2 hits. That's not an exaggeration either. See, nowadays, top lane is populated by very independent and aggressive solo-oriented champs like Camille, Darius, Aatrox, Riven and such, but that wasn't always the case. During seasons 5 and 6, just before her release, it would be rare to encounter someone from the Skirmisher or Diver subclass up there. Top lane was predominantly occupied by tanks and juggernauts. You may remember the tank meta that took place during 2015 to 2017. We also didn't see very many traditional carry-oriented champions for some time either. Prior to her was Kled, Alawi, Tahm Kench, and Nard to name a few, so when Camille was teased as a hyper-mobile high-damage top laner, there was a ton of excitement, especially when we were told that she would be a viable answer to the prevailing tank meta at the time. And boy did she leave an impression. The full power of each of her attacks is locked behind some kind of condition, but if you're able to meet that condition every time, her kit transforms from an underwhelming fighter into one of the strongest. That's sort of the MO around her design, precision, and why she becomes more lethal when piloted by high-level players. The idea at a glance is rather interesting. We've always had champions in the past with abilities that required precise accuracy, timing, or positioning to achieve their full power, such as Nidalee's Javelin Toss, Annie's Pyromania, Darius' Decimate, and whatnot, but never someone whose entire playstyle was centered around it. In Camille's case, it's not necessarily about complex positioning like Zed or flashy execution like Lee Sin. Her idea of precision is a bit more subdued than that, though she doesn't compromise on effectiveness whatsoever. Players have to fine-tune their mechanics and windows of opportunity to capitalize on her strengths while minimizing her periods of vulnerability, but her insanely good risk-to-reward ratio is what earned her a spot as one of the 4 horsewomen at top lane, a position she holds to this day. Let's quickly go through those precision elements in each of her abilities. Adaptive Defenses causes her next basic attack to grant her a considerably strong shield for a short period of time. But unlike other shields, the damage absorption is not universal. It can only cover either physical or magic damage, which one she gets is dependent on 2 different factors: the main damage type of her enemy and the balance of armor and magic resist on her. What's interesting to note about her passive is how much of a shield it gives. 20% is very high for such an easy activation requirement. For comparison, Poppy's Iron Ambassador doesn't give you a 20% shield until level 13, and to proc it, she has to last hit a minion with it or pick it up from the ground. You'll notice a similar degree of payoff on everything else about her kit. We're gonna pass on her Q for a moment since I want to save that for last. Tactical Sweep, I would say, is her most benign ability. You can think of it almost like Darius' Q, only it has way more outer range. If you land the sweet spot with it, it does bonus max health damage, slows the target by a lot, and heals her for the bonus damage dealt. It may not seem like a whole lot of damage, but when you factor how much range it has and how little commitment it takes on her part, this is one of the best attacks a fighter can have in the neutral. It's free harass and sustain. Naturally, the precision element here is positioning. Hookshot speaks for itself. It's an 800 range dash that pulls her towards the nearest wall, upon which she can recast a dash off that wall with the same 800 range if she aims for an enemy champion. If she hits a champion, not only does it do damage and stuns them, but she gains a huge attack speed buff. The precision element here is accuracy. Then we have Precision Protocol, rest in peace Cho'Gath. At a glance, it's a normal basic attack that gives a short speed boost on hit, but she can cast it twice with each rotation, and if she waits a second and a half, the bonus damage is doubled and 40 to 100% of the attack's total damage is converted to true damage. Bear in mind, this thing is a 25 mana cost and a 6-second cooldown at rank 5. For this attack, the precision element is timing. Now, the reason why people keep joking about how it's a Cho'Gath ultimate for a Q is because Precision Protocol's second hit doesn't just do increased damage, but it does modified damage, meaning it converts any and all supplementary effects such as Spellblade or on-hit bonuses into that final damage form. Other champions have this property like Victor and Echo, but the reason it's so crazy on her is due to hers being true damage, which ignores armor and magic resist. It would be one thing if only the bonus ability damage was true damage, but it's the bonus ability damage on top of her base auto attack damage on top of on-hit effects like Spellblade. By level 14 or so, her Qs start doing over 800 true damage. So let's compile all of her traits. Her passive grants her a shield on auto attack, which she does a lot thanks to her Q, 2 empowered auto attacks that grant bonus movement speed with each hit, with the second attack doing true damage. Her W is a mid-range AoE slash that slows enemies and heals her against champions. Her E is one of the longest single dashes in the game, and it comes equipped with a stun and attack speed steroid. And finally, her ultimate creates a hexagonal cage that literally prevents her target from escaping by any means. Are you starting to notice what her kit is all about? Normally, when you play a champion with a lot of conditional factors in their kit, that tends to work against them since it makes them inconsistent depending on what those conditions are. For example, the reason why Zyra is inconsistent is due to her plants being incapable of moving from their spot. So if a teamfight relocates out of her sphere of control, her damage falls off a cliff. Same goes for someone like Tarek. His abilities are devastatingly powerful, but asking your team to hold still is easier said than done in solo queue. Camille, on the other hand, despite her conditions, is ultra consistent because everything in her kit was designed to be conducive to each other. She has the perfect combination of offense, defense, and mobility to make it easy for her to attack you while mitigating your attacks against her. And even though she's designed to be precision-based, their X factors easily lead to one another. The bulk of her damage comes from auto attacks, namely Precision Protocol. The inherent weakness of auto attacks is that for melee champions, they have to be on top of their opponent to attack them, and that naturally leaves them vulnerable to counterattacks as well. For the first issue, all 4 of her active abilities specialize in getting her within range or locking her target in place. Her Q, bonus movement speed, which lets her stay on top of her opponent for the 1.5 second wait time. Her W sweet spot is an 80% decaying slow for 2 seconds, also letting her walk up to them. Her E is a 1600 range dash, have fun trying to escape that. And once again, her ultimate literally traps you in a zone for a few seconds. In her own words,
"You will stay where I want you to stay."
That's partly the reason why she's classified as a diver and not a skirmisher. Skirmishers are generally easy to kite or peel off, such as Tryndamere or Jax. You can't really do that against Camille, certainly not in a one-on-one confrontation. She can also shrug off counterattacks with her passive shield and on-target ability from her ultimate, essentially guaranteeing she wins every single trade in lane and buying her enough time to survive in the late game. As to the precision factors comboing into one another, what was originally supposed to be a hindrance can actually be used to her advantage. Precision Protocol grants her bonus movement speed, allowing you to stay close to your target, but you still have to wait a second and a half. However, you can use that speed boost to retreat back and position tactical sweeps out a hit more easily, which slows your opponent down. Being slowed means they're easier to hit with your hook shot, which is easy to sidestep otherwise. After diving on them, you can recast your Q for big damage. None of her conditions slow her tempo down in any way. They build off of each other, and she can mix up her rotation in different ways. Slow her tempo down that this wasn't intentional. Early on in her release, it was made very clear her risk to reward ratio was too generous, and so for the better part of Season 7 and 8, Camille was hit with nerfs designed to narrow her margin for error. Those quote-unquote precision factors didn't tax a player's precision at all really. Hookshot lost a quarter second on its stun and now only grants bonus attack speed if she hits a champion. Tactical Sweep Slow no longer is a persistent amount and decays down to 0. Hextech Ultimatum lasts much shorter early on, reducing her early game pressure. Also, Tactical Sweep and Hookshot's cooldowns were significantly increased to punish her for being careless with her traits. Same with Adapted Defenses, which got a longer cooldown to give her more vulnerability in between traits. Technically, these changes are the correct way to go about balancing someone if your goal is to keep them viable while making them harder to play. But none of these changes stop her from being able to do 1000 true damage every 4 seconds, and good players know this, which is why they keep playing her. If the only thing you nerf about a champion is how reckless you can afford to be on them, then if you're not reckless, it's as if they were never nerfed in the first place. Anyways, going further on that consistency, Camille is one of the most meta-resilient top laners in the game for 3 reasons. First, she does true damage. This makes her strong in tank metas because it means she can counter tanks. This makes her strong in damage metas, so she'll most likely one-shot everyone just as much as an assassin can because you can't itemize against true damage. Aside from health, but you get what I mean. This makes her strong in late game metas too because more of her damage converts into true damage. Most true damage attacks tend to have poor scaling or limited application so as not to spiral out of control. Ahri's Orbital Deception does true damage on the way back, but only half, and it's not that much true damage. Olaf's Reckless Swing is true damage, but with average scaling. It's also extremely rare for a champion to have on-hit true damage. The only 2 that come to mind are Camille and Master Yi. but of the two, Camille's true damage is modified, so anything that were to make her basic attack stronger also makes her true damage stronger. Take Divine Sunder for instance, the Spellblade damage is equal to 12% of the target's maximum health, and since Precision Protocol converts Spellblade damage into true damage, she is now the third champion in the game, alongside Vayne and Fiora, who has % max health true damage built into her kit. The only damage metric that's impossible to itemize against. Her Q is just broken, that's what it comes down to. Second, her laning phase is very safe, especially considering how well she scales. Adaptive Defense allows her to trade against her lane opponent without losing too much health, and whatever she does lose, she can somewhat heal back up with Tactical Sweep. Also, Hookshot is just as good of a disengage tool as it is engage, so if you try to go in on her and she doesn't want to fight, she can yeet herself right on out. Basically, Camille can dictate the pace of laning phase at her discretion. If she wants to fight you, she can do that. If she doesn't want to fight you, she can do that. Meanwhile, unless you're a high DPS rushdown fighter, she's gonna outscale you hard with even a mere 2 items, cause at that point, she's around level 11 to 13, which means her Qs start doing about 400 to 500 true damage apiece. And third, she's one of the few divers in the game whose damage is not linked to her engage. The diver class is famously known for their amazing engage potential. They can either gap close from a very far distance or inflict destructive area damage that can potentially combo into follow-up from the rest of their team. But most of them put all of their power into that frontal assault. If they fail to pressure the enemy team sufficiently enough, or they don't have enough burst damage to dispatch their target, they're left wide open to enemy response, such as the case for the likes of Jarvan IV, Vi, Renekton, Lee Sin, Pantheon, and so on. Or even if they have gas left in the tank, it's only marginal, at least when compared to their first strike. That'd be champs like Hecarim, Rengar, Olaf, Wukong, and Diana. Camille, on the other hand, is the only diver whose DPS remains the same from the start of a fight to the end of it, since her Q is where all her pressure is and it's virtually spammable in the mid to late game. Not to mention, Hookshot gives her a multitude of ways in and out of a fight, whereas other divers can only really charge at you head on. Putting it all together, Camille's popularity stems from how consistent she is. In a role where being first pick can sometimes lose you the entire lane, Camille is one of the few champions who can perform well on every level and matchup if you know how to use her. She rips apart tanks as time goes on, she can deal with ranged top laners easily with her engage and neutral game. She is hard to get an advantage on if she chooses not to interact with you, which means it's not a matter of if she'll reach 1v9 mode, but when. Hypercarry champions are usually exploitable during laning phase, so if you garner a sizable lead on them, then you can delay their late game power spikes long enough to end games before that happens. Usually that's easy to do considering they have to put themselves in harm's way to collect gold and experience. Camille doesn't, not to the same extent. Granted, she does have a few losing matchups, but that only applies in lane. Whoever has an advantage against her gets outscaled to all hell, like Pantheon, Renekton, and Darius, and anyone who can go toe-to-toe with her late game usually loses to her in lane like Fiora, Kayle, and Tryndamere. So overall, she's very safe conceptually speaking, not many hard losing matchups. The main reason she performs worse at lower ranks is her margin for error. In my personal opinion, she's not as difficult to master as someone like Jace, but she still is a very skill-dependent champion, and with the recent nerfs to her basic abilities, it really comes down to how frequently and safely you can land your empowered Qs. Be that as it may, her play rate shoots above 15 to 20% on many occasions thanks to her versatile and, in some instances, unstoppable repertoire. Even among the 4 horsewomen in top lane, I would say she's the most consistent. Maybe not the same kind of crazy rushdown as Riven and Irelia, and she has nowhere near the same kind of true damage as Fiora, but she's harder to punish and is less feast or famine, which is a worthwhile trade-off in light of the volatility of top lane. Not gonna lie though, I really don't know how healthy it is to have someone who does that much true damage on top of having that kind of mobility. The 4 horsewomen are some of the most despised champs of all time for different reasons, and Camille's is obviously for the fact that she can start two-shotting people once she finishes Divine Sunder or Trinity Force. The problem is, there are so many champions who unironically cannot do anything against her no matter how hard they try. Her gap closing covers such a large distance, she can lock you in a set area with no way to escape or cleanse out of it, and the later the game goes on, the more her damage transforms from a fighter to assassin while keeping the durability of a fighter. She's like Nasus but infinitely better. I hate her so much. I wish she wasn't a why everyone plays champion. She's so broken. Yes, I'm traumatized. Leave me alone. We're gonna end it off here for today though. Let me know what your thoughts are on Camille in the comments down below. Come on, I can't be the only one who hates her, right? Please tell me I'm not on copium. There's gotta be at least a few people who agree with me. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Why Everyone Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next video. Take care.